So the Taramps Big Boss and Smart Series amplifiers popularity has exploded, and for good reason. They are fantastic value for the amount of power they give you, for the price and the size. They are sick, but there is a bit of an issue, and people ask me all the time about running the Big Boss 3, 5, 8 or the Smart amplifiers and running more than one of them in the same setup. And a lot of the time this isn't even a consideration as to why that might be a problem. However, because of how these amps work and how they behave when you're running them hard at low impedances, it's not necessarily a good idea to run more than one of them. And if you do need to run multiple amplifiers, I've been recommending people to run not smart amplifiers, just like regular, like the base 15K up there, for example, awesome amplifier. But I want to show you why I don't think it's a good idea to run multiple smart or Big Boss amplifiers in the same build. So I'm here with my man SineWave02 on the bench because he's got a monstrous lithium freaking power supply setup that I wouldn't want to have anywhere near my house, let alone where I sleep. But there we go, man's crazy. So we've got a Big Boss 3 on the bench, and we've got an oscilloscope hooked up with some resistive loads, and we're currently wired to 0.8 ohms, which will show up on the SMD meter. Now I just want to show you what the sine wave looks like when this runs into current mode clip. Now, because these are smart amps, as I've explained in previous videos, they have two different ways at which they will clip. They have the regular old-fashioned clip that is what you think it is, where the sine wave tries to extend higher than the internal rail voltage of the amplifier, so therefore the sine wave clips off at the top and bottom, and that's your standard clip, and these will do this. However, these will also clip in a different way. Because they are designed to produce the same amount of power from 0.5 to 2 ohm, well, in order to do that, when you're wired below 2 ohm, like a 1 or a 0.5 or anywhere in between, the amplifier needs to draw back the signal going into the amplifier stage to prevent you from making or trying to make more than 3K. And that's how it does it. It literally is constantly monitoring the current across the output section, and if it detects a higher current than its set threshold for about 3K at all those different impedances, then it will draw back and rein back the signal level to only allow a desired amount of power through. And that's not clipping in the old-fashioned sense. It's not clipping or cutting the top and the bottom of the sine wave off, but it's a limit. It's a limit that you run into on the amplifier. So you could call it clipping, and I call it current mode clip, because you've run into a limit of the amplifier, but you've not run into the rail limit, you've run into the current limit. And so what the amplifier does is it prevents you from exceeding that. But the way that it prevents you from exceeding that is by reining back the amount of signal that the preamp stage is letting into the amplifier output stage. And we're going to see that happen on the scope real quick now. So like I said, we're wired to 0.8 at the moment on the SMD meter at a resistive load. We've got a sine wave going in. Now watch carefully the scope. As I increase the volume here, we're going to get to a point where the amplifier is at its limit, and we're going to see what happens. So I'm keep increasing and keep increasing. And see, we're going to get to a point there where we have hit the limit, and I'm not touching that. You can see the sine wave there is bouncing up and down, up and down, up and down, and it's doing that itself. And that is the amplifier trying to limit the amount of power and the amount of current to a set threshold. Let's just let it sort of cool down for a minute and show you that again. I'm going to roll up much quicker this time. And you can see the power on the SMD meter in the background as well. I'll just kind of focus on that a little bit so you can see. Yeah, so you can see we are making, occasionally we're making about 4.5K there on its peaks, but it's trying to average out at around 3K. So this is why some people who have used these amplifiers say that, oh, you know, when you turn it up loud, the bass kind of seems to come and go and it kind of gets loud and quiet, loud and quiet. If that's happening, then you're hitting the limit of the amplifier that you're using. And if that's happening and your subs aren't at their limits as well, then you just need a bigger amp. Your amp is clipping, but it's not clipping in the old-fashioned sense. And the clip light on these amplifiers isn't particularly reliable in showing you when you're actually at the current clip limit, or it doesn't really seem to come on every single time or come on reliably enough for you to be like, oh hey, you know, I'm at the limit of the amp here. So when this sine wave is kind of coming and going, bouncing and bouncing like this, that is when you've run out of amplifier, and your solution then is to just turn it down so you're not in that kind of current mode clip, or just get a bigger amplifier, because if you want to push past that volume, that amount of output, then you're going to need a bigger amplifier, because the amp you're using is currently at its limit. So why is it not a good idea to run multiple of these together in the same system? Well, the way that this is limiting the sine wave and bouncing up and down like this is not the same every time. It's not doing it into any defined pattern. It's doing it based on exact amounts of current across the shunt resistor inside or whatever at any given time. And if you've got two of these amps, one running one sub, one running another sub, and the subs are in the car and you've got windows open or you've got a port on one side, there's going to be minute loading differences between the subs, and even if there's minute setup differences between the amps and the clip, you know, the gain position isn't exactly the same, then one of the amps is going to do this current mode clip behavior slightly differently to the other, which is going to mean that your two subs are going to move slightly differently, and you might have unloading issues where one sub is still pushing into the sort of high amplitude sine wave part and the other one has reined back a bit already. So you're going to get this really unbalanced effect when the amps are at their limit. So I don't like the idea of that. Especially, you know, if someone was running like a pair of Big Boss 8 or even like 4 Big Boss 8s, you got a lot of power there, and if, you know, there's an unloading issue and one of the subs stops moving as much, then the others can move too much and you can damage the woofers mechanically, etc. So based on that, that is why I don't recommend people run multiple Smart or Big Boss amplifiers in the same install. And if you do need multiple amplifiers, based on the testing that we've done and that you've done, the base 15K, out of all of the 15Ks currently on the market, is probably my favourite one from the results I've seen. We've got a few 15Ks here. We've got the base phase team 15K up there. I think that's the V1.5, I think. Was that the V1?
That's the new revision, so there'll be some,
We've got the base 15K. I've worked on the Band of Viking 15K a lot, and it has potential, but it's just not stable. Like there's some great stuff in the Band of Viking 15K. It has, you know, it's like an absolute tank. It's just not stable. The drive circuitry, control circuitry, is not stable enough. What the 15Ks we've got going floating around? We've got the old Powerhouse PW 15K. Again, has potential, but there's some things I don't like about it. I don't like how inefficient it is when you start pushing it very hard, and the output inductors just get really freaking hot. There's some issues there. Yeah. The base 15K, from what I've seen, is the most rounded, most efficient, most balanced, well set up, high power amplifier. So yeah, if you do need multiple amps, get like a base 8K or base 15K. Don't go with the Smart one. But if you have a setup where you just need a single amplifier, and you only need 8K, 5K, 3K, whatever it is, then these amps are phenomenal for the money and for the amount of output you get. They behave like a much bigger amplifier because of the smart circuitry. But if you do run into this weird kind of behavior where it's coming and going and you kind of is loud, not loud, loud, not loud, like you saw on the scope there, then you either need to turn it down or you need a bigger amplifier.